The wind howled across the empty plains of the Wild West as the sun slowly sank behind the jagged mountains. Dust swirled across the narrow trail where a lone cowboy rode slowly on his horse. His name was Daniel Carter, a quiet man known around the territory as someone who kept to himself. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, and his weathered coat fluttered in the cold evening breeze. Daniel had spent most of his life alone on the frontier, working cattle and moving from ranch to ranch. After losing his wife and newborn child years ago during a brutal winter sickness, he had closed his heart to the world. That evening, Daniel was riding back toward his small cabin near the creek after delivering cattle to a ranch 30 miles away. The journey had been long, and he was eager to return to the quiet solitude of his land. The sky had turned a deep orange when something unusual caught his attention. A faint sound. At first, he thought it was just the wind moving through the tall grass. But then he heard it again. A cry. A weak, trembling cry that barely rose above the sound of rushing water. Daniel pulled the reins of his horse. The animal stopped and snorted softly, its ears twitching. "Easy, boy," Daniel muttered. He listened carefully. There it was again. A baby's cry. His heart skipped. Out here, miles from any town, hearing a baby was nearly impossible. Daniel quickly guided his horse toward the creek. As he approached, the sound became clearer, fragile and desperate. He dismounted and walked along the muddy bank. Then he saw it. A rough burlap sack lying half submerged in the shallow water, slowly drifting against the rocks. The sack moved. And from inside came another tiny cry. Daniel's chest tightened. His boots splashed through the cold creek water as he rushed forward. Kneeling down, he pulled the sack out of the water and quickly untied the rope holding it shut. Inside was a tiny baby girl, wrapped in a thin cloth already soaked with icy water. Her cheeks were pale, and her small hands trembled from the cold. For a moment, Daniel froze. Someone had thrown this child into the creek like trash. His jaw clenched as anger burned inside him. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. The baby cried weakly as he lifted her carefully into his arms. She was freezing, barely conscious. Without wasting a second, Daniel wrapped the child inside his coat and rushed back to his horse. "Hang on, little one," he murmured. He mounted quickly and rode hard toward his cabin. The wind cut through the night air as darkness fell across the land. Daniel urged his horse faster, his heart pounding harder with every passing minute. He could feel the baby's weak breathing against his chest, and fear gripped him. He had already lost one child in his life. He refused to lose another. After what felt like forever, the dim light of his cabin finally appeared through the trees. Daniel kicked the door open and rushed inside. The small cabin smelled of firewood and leather. He quickly lit the lantern and placed the baby near the fireplace. He removed the wet cloths and wrapped her in a warm blanket. Then he heated water and gently rubbed warmth back into her tiny hands and feet. For several terrifying minutes, the baby barely moved. Daniel sat beside her, his large hands shaking slightly. "Come on, little one," he whispered softly. Then suddenly, the baby stirred. Her tiny eyes slowly opened. A faint breath escaped Daniel's chest. She was alive. The baby looked at him with wide, confused eyes. Then she reached out her tiny hand and grabbed one of his rough fingers. Daniel felt something deep inside his chest crack open. Something he thought had died years ago. The baby blinked slowly, then made a soft sound. "Mama." Daniel's heart stopped. The word was barely a whisper, but it echoed loudly inside the silent cabin. He stared at the tiny child in disbelief. "Mama," he repeated softly. His throat tightened. The baby clung to his finger like he was the only safe thing in the world. And in that moment, the lonely cowboy who had spent years running from pain realized something. This little girl had just changed his life forever. But neither of them knew that the people who tried to kill her were still out there. And they would soon come looking for what they thought the creek had taken away. The storm rolled across the plains during the night, rain tapping against the wooden roof of Daniel Carter's cabin. Inside, the fire crackled warmly while the tiny baby slept peacefully in a small wooden box Daniel had lined with blankets. Daniel sat nearby, watching her. He hadn't slept at all. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the sight of that sack floating in the cold creek water. Someone had tried to murder this child. The thought made his fists clench. But when he looked at her sleeping face, something else filled his heart. Hope. Morning sunlight slowly filled the cabin. The baby stirred and opened her eyes again. Daniel gently picked her up. "Well, little one," he said softly, "guess it's just you and me now." The baby looked at him curiously. Then she smiled. It was the smallest smile, but it hit Daniel harder than a bullet. For the first time in years, the lonely cowboy laughed. "I reckon you need a name," he said. After a moment he nodded. "Hope, that's what I'll call you." Days passed, and Daniel slowly learned how to care for a baby. He rode to the nearest town to buy milk, blankets, and supplies. The townsfolk were shocked to see the tough cowboy holding a baby girl in his arms. But Daniel didn't care what anyone thought. Hope had become his whole world. Yet trouble was already riding toward them. One evening, Daniel noticed 3 unfamiliar riders watching his cabin from the hill. His instincts told him something was wrong. Later that night, the riders approached. Their leader, a cruel man named Briggs, knocked on Daniel's door. "We're looking for something," Briggs said coldly. Daniel stepped outside, blocking the doorway. "Ain't nothing here for you." Briggs smirked. "A baby girl, thrown in the creek yesterday." Daniel's blood ran cold. "You wouldn't know nothing about that, would you, cowboy?" Behind Daniel, Hope suddenly cried. The men heard it. Briggs' eyes darkened. "Well now," he said slowly, "seems the creek didn't finish the job." Daniel's hand slowly moved toward his revolver. "You're not touching her." Briggs laughed. "That child is trouble. Someone paid good money to make sure she disappeared." Daniel's eyes burned with fury. "Then you better tell whoever paid, they're gonna have to come through me." For a moment, the night was silent. Then Briggs reached for his gun. But Daniel Carter had been a gunslinger long before he became a rancher. The shot echoed across the valley. Briggs' gun fell from his hand. The other men quickly backed away, realizing they had made a terrible mistake. "You come near this cabin again," Daniel said coldly, "and the creek will carry all of you away." The men fled into the darkness. Daniel walked back inside. Hope was crying again. He gently picked her up and rocked her in his arms. "It's all right," he whispered. The baby slowly calmed down and rested her head against his chest. And once again she made that soft whisper. "Mama." Daniel smiled sadly. "I ain't your mama," he said quietly. "But I promise you this." His voice became firm. "I'll be the father you deserve." Outside, the storm had passed. And in that small cabin by the creek, a lonely cowboy and a baby girl who should have died had just become a family. A family born not by blood, but by a miracle. Red Heart, if you enjoyed this emotional Wild West story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful cowboy story. More unforgettable frontier stories are coming soon.